Welcome to Every Day is a New Day, the inspirational interview show about moving forward beyond challenging times. Over the next hour, I'm going to be speaking with my guest, Elana Davidson. We're going to be talking about empaths, coaching for empaths, her new book coming out, as well as taking time to get to learn about Elana and her story. I'm going to take a quick check on Facebook and make sure that we are showing up over there. And it looks like we are. Awesome. Okay. So if you are with us on Facebook, I'm going to go ahead and close it now as well. So if you are with us on Facebook, feel free to go ahead and say hello. And if you know other people that may be interested in this conversation, then yes, please share it with them, because the conversation about empaths being sensitive, and there's so much that's wrapped up in that, has been something that's been taking place quite a bit, I know, with me and in some of the online courses that I've been putting out there and conversations I've been having with people. And I know Elana is doing the same, but this may be coming up for you and other people in your life. And this is new for a lot of people. So please go ahead and share it if you know some people who may find today's interview interesting. And looks like we do have a couple people here. So hello to Jason and Betty. Thank you for being with us today. Awesome. So I want to go ahead and welcome Elana to the show. So welcome, Elana.
Thank you. Great to be here. So happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here today. So will you go ahead and just start off by giving everyone a brief overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Elana Davidson. I just wrote the book, Finding Your Own Happy. And I coach empaths and other sensitive people who are feeling emotionally drained, overwhelmed, exhausted, to reclaim their energy and vitality for their own lives. Being an empathic person can be a very confusing, draining, overwhelming experience, and can make it hard to really get where you want to go or get the kind of life that you want to have. So that's a lot of about the work that I do, is really empowering us empaths and sensitive people of the world to use our empathic abilities to our advantage and to really create lives that work for us, because we're so often so mixed up in everybody else's life that all of our energy is going there. So now, yeah, go ahead.
Did you always know that you were an empath?
No, that's the thing that I wanted to say. A lot of people don't realize that this is part of the issue. And the book was written from the premise of people who go, hey, I've done all this spiritual development, I've done all this personal growth, maybe I've even gone to therapy. Why am I still not all that happy? Why do I still have so many emotional problems? And that was my journey. I did so much work on myself. And after 20 plus years of struggling with depression and feeling like my life just really wasn't getting that much easier, I was introduced to the concept of empath and realized that so much of my emotional roller coaster and my upheaval was actually me absorbing and taking on and feeling everybody else's stuff and thinking it was mine and trying to process it myself. And so, of course, I couldn't get out of it because it wasn't mine. And I just kept feeling everything that people were giving to me. So after so many years of still feeling depressed, it's like, well, you're taking on all this stuff from everybody else. You're not going to get out of it by inquiring into yourself, what's going on for you, because it's just awareness of what's going on around you.
Now, so tell us more. Thank you for sharing that, because that's what I've also found, is that a lot of people are not aware. I was not aware. I'm not as sensitive. I know there's very, very,
There are degrees, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. There's degrees of that. And for me, it started out with, I could see it in other people. I had learned about it and I could see it in other people. And then all of a sudden it started to dawn on me, oh, that's partly what's been going on with me too. And I didn't realize it. So would you share with us a little bit more about your story, about how, how you got to this place of now writing your book? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time in my life. So I had a sort of emotional struggles throughout my life since I was probably preteen, dealing with depression, dealing with things like that. And I grew up in a family that was oriented toward personal development and spirituality. So I always had that in my life. And yet there were so many, I had been working on my stuff for so many years and still struggled so much. And part of that was struggling with depression. Part of that was literally feeling like I was crazy. That's happened to me more than once. And it's something I hear from a lot of other empathic people. They think like, am I just nuts? Because I'm aware of things that are going on with other people or like in a social setting that seems to like bother nobody else, be totally unrecognized by anybody else. And like, is my perception of reality totally off? And am I just going crazy? And so sort of the beginning of my journey was being introduced to this idea that maybe like a huge percent of my thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, anything that I'm picking up on actually wasn't mine. And there was a moment I'd been dating this guy, and that whole summer I spent a lot of it in tears and like crying and feeling distraught and all this kind of stuff. And there were certainly issues in my relationship to be upset over, but it was kind of more than that. And then I left the relationship. I was doing much better. I remember I went back to his house where he lived with his parents, and I was feeling pretty good. I walked in the door, and it was like this wave of emotion just hit me. Like, oh my gosh. And that was the moment that I realized all of that emotion that I had been experiencing all summer and all the tears, it was me being invested in and tangled up in all the unresolved emotion of his family that they weren't willing to look at. And I had just taken it on and tried to process it if it were mine. And so that was the beginning of really understanding, okay, that is not me. And I do a lot of trying to pull in other people's emotional content and process it when I'm aware of it and they're not. So a lot of us have repressed emotions and repressed feelings. And one of my empathic gifts, if you will, or abilities is that I can feel those often. And sometimes I feel stuff that other people aren't even aware that's going on with themselves, which is partly what makes it so confusing. If I said to this person, oh, I have a sense that, there's this thing going on with you, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. And yet I can feel it sometimes. So that was a big turning point for me. And then a lot to sort of learn what that meant and how to work with it, and so many more layers after that.
How were you able to discern that what you were picking up on was from his family? I know you said you opened the door and it hit you, but was there another element to that made it obvious to you that it was theirs and not yours?
Completely familiar to where I had been that whole summer when I was in that house a lot of the time, and to walk in and feel perfectly fine and then feel like I was like literally going, this is really weird. What is happening in here? Because I feel like I'm being sucked into something right now. And so that was a very clear moment. Not always am I so clear about what's mine and what's not. But in that moment, it really just felt like, wow, this contrast. Here I am doing fine. Here I am not. And it's very familiar to everything I went through that summer. So.
Wow. I love that. So awesome. Okay. Let's take a quick look at the comments. I see we do have a few viewers here. And hello to Anne, who is checking in. Thank you. And okay, so we are good on the comments. So what are some things that you've learned to be able to separate the emotions that you're picking up on that aren't yours? Separate yourself from that.
Yes. Well, that's a huge one. And the first thing I learned was to ask, is this mine?
Yes,
and wherever stop feeling, well, the exercise I was given, which I really love because it starts to give you a sense of what is you, what is truly you, and what's everything else, which is for me, and I think for probably other empaths, like only a small fraction of everything going on is actually me. And it's mostly just the ease and the space and peace, and all of this other craziness is not me most of the time. And so you ask, is this mine, or who does this belong to? And if it gets lighter or shifts for you, it didn't belong to you. That doesn't always work. Sometimes you think you really are convinced that it's yours when it's not. But I've had moments when I'm literally crying tears down my face going, wait a minute, is this even mine? Who does this belong to? And one very particular moment, the tears just stopped and went away. And I was like, wow, I don't even feel sad anymore. I can't even like get back to that feeling of sadness. So that's a big starting point, is just to not assume that just because you feel something, just because you think it, because you experience it, that it has to be yours. Because the more I inquire into this and more I look at this and more I work with other people on this, is so much of what is going on for us is actually us being aware of things outside of us and other people's realities. So,
in case there's anyone that's watching and it's wondering, what are they talking about? I just want to go ahead and put it out there that let's bring it back to everything is energy. So even though maybe we haven't shared what's going on with us as we're going about our day, going about the world, you know, we're radiating whatever's going on within us. We're vibrating that, and other people may pick up on it. So that's what we're talking about.
Right. You walk into a room sometimes and you can just tell that like you can feel the tension in the room, right? Or you can think about somebody and they immediately call you on the phone. That's like our ability to be connected to other people and other people's realities. And so it goes just like so much more beyond what like we commonly recognize, I would say. But I think all of us can find those places in our lives where we're like, what's up with her? Even though she said nothing, you know, or there's no obvious sign that there's something going on, and just now magnify that times 100, and there you have
right.
Empathic experience.
Well, and I love what you said about not assuming, and I want to apply that in a different way too, because I completely agree. It's good to not assume that everything we're experiencing is ours. And on the flip side, I've also learned, and please share your thoughts on this. I've also learned, though, it's not good to assume that when I can identify something is someone else's, to not necessarily assume that I know what that means or what all that entails, because I may be picking up on a vibration, but you know, if that person hasn't really shared with me what's going on with them, I might, using what I know, assuming someone's not psychic necessarily, that, you know, but I might be just placing what I know about that person and all of a sudden start to make other assumptions that, oh, this must be what's going on with them, when maybe it's something else that is emanating a similar vibration. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. My thought on that is that you can gain a lot of it. So what I do is I ask questions and I see what feels right for me. And I go with that sort of as what I think of as the working hypothesis. And if I get any other information, I'm willing to be wrong. But as long as it creates more space for me and helps me in how I'm relating to that person, then I think there's no harm in it. So I wouldn't assume it's the absolute truth. I would assume there's some grain of truth in it for me, and it's helping my experience, and it's helping my experience with that person. So like, oh, that person is actually, I don't have a good example right now, but I'll tap in and be like, oh, that person is like putting on a happy face, but actually there's something ongoing underneath. That feels really light for me. Okay, I'm curious about what that is. Or this person is being really sweet to me on the surface, but I'm getting some other really weird vibe. And, oh, there's some like weird competition thing going on here. Oh, cool. Now that I'm aware of that, it's going to create a lot more ease for me and like a lot more space for me to relate to that person if I know that that's happening, instead of like, oh, I couldn't know that. How is that possible? And then I'm totally willing to have it change and be wrong. I think where we get stuck is like, this is how it is. I know I'm right and I have this fixed point of view. So it's just following the energy and allowing it to be changed, to change and shift as you go.
I love that you brought it back to the curiousness and allowing it to be okay for you to be wrong and not quite have that answer, right? So I think that's really good, relationship wise between two people.
I hate it when other people assume that they know what's true for me when it's totally off and wrong. And they're like, I know what's going on for you. But if you stay in the realm of curiosity and like, is this helping me and is helping them, then it can be beneficial. And I've had times where I'm feeling something, and I will get a sense of who it's related to. And the couple times I'm thinking of, they weren't even in my physical presence. They were like, maybe hundreds of miles away even. But I asked questions, and then I contacted them and I asked them about their experience. And in the two cases I'm thinking of, both of them said, yes, that's exactly what's going on for me. So
Wow.
that was some validation that, like, okay, there is something to this. And even if not everyone is going to say, yes, what you're saying is true, or maybe, like I
Uh-oh, the video
they
froze
might
on
not.
my... Elana?
I'm still here. Can you see me?
Okay, I think we're back on track. Yes.
Yeah. So if it helps me and if it helps them, if it's creating more for all of us, then I go with it. And that's sort of how, like, no, it's not maybe the absolute truth, but it's creating benefit to my life and to other people's lives. So
Now, along the lines of relationships, I have heard from some of my just other people that I've come in contact with who are empaths, and a few friends and family that I have. There tends to be this common theme of empaths getting into relationships with narcissists.
yes, I've just been, that hadn't been super familiar to me, but I have just been recently hearing that a lot.
Okay,
And
I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. I thought I'd mention it.
well, one of the things that empaths do that I notice is we tend to be caretakers of other people, and we tend to create a lot of space for other people and sometimes remove ourselves from that space. So it's very natural for empaths, because they feel what's going on with other people, to try to, like, heal it, solve it, resolve it, be a rescuer to some degree. And so a narcissist is going to sense that and easily take advantage of that. Now, you don't have to be that kind of an empath. You can learn to not give your power away like that, not try to take care of everyone else all the time, and just be really clear in yourself. So I don't think it's a given that just because you're an empath, you're going to attract these dysfunctional relationships to your life. But if you do have a pattern, and maybe non-empaths do this too, but if you do have a pattern of trying to rescue people and save them, or get them to sort of, part of the pattern of rescuer is to give and give and give and hope that that person will turn around and give to you and take care of you and love you. And so if that's your pattern with a narcissist, it's going to be, you're going to tie right into it. It's going to be very difficult, because you're going to constantly be looking for that, like, appreciation, gratification, and never get it. And it's just going to be a little, so, and I know, like, for me being an empath, relationships is some of the most challenging places, and it's kind of my current frontier is navigating that and learning how to be strong in what I know and what I'm aware of that is going on under the surface, and really not back down on that, and really own it for myself, and not give my power away. So maybe I'll write a book about that someday once I have that figured out. But
no, thank you for just sharing what you did, though, because I think for those that have recognized that that's the relationship that they're in, I think just the awareness of that is huge. And to start to learn that they can learn tools of how to work with that, and that it can be different. I think that that's
a huge piece, maybe like within the narcissistic experience, or just like within, I think, a lot of the way that a lot of people have developed their empathic abilities, is the more that you can learn to trust you and your perception of reality and your experience of reality, and not question it, because especially in these one-on-one dynamics, it can become really twisted up. And so you have to validate yourself and your own truth and what you know to be true. And because it can be so easy to go in, oh, well, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just making shit up. Maybe this isn't really real. And that just takes you on this crazy spiral. And if you really honor you and know it's true for you, it's going to take you a lot further. And I have a little saying that I like, which helped me more in my family, but also in romantic relationship, which is love when it feels like love to me.
Nice.
And like all these things that people, oh, I love you, or this is love. You just don't know how to receive love, whatever. It's like, no, I'm going to know when it feels like love to me. And that is love to me. And that's what I'm going to go on. So
I think that's a great point to make, because I think it can be so easy to start to fall into assuming we know what love is supposed to feel like. But if we stop and ask ourselves, wait, does this actually feel good? Do I want this kind of love? Then
right. And so many of us go, oh, like we're in this relationship and it seems like it looks a certain way, and you're wondering like, why am I not feeling it? What's wrong with me? It's like,
right.
Listen to that. And love is just one word, but you can say the same thing of respect. You can say the same thing of care. You can say the same thing of honor. You can say the same thing of so many different things. Is like, no, like I'm going to know what that is for me. And, and
Yeah.
it's so easy in the relationship dynamic to let the other person dictate what that is, and then to feel really confused. Like, oh, well, they said they really care about me, or they said they really respect me, or that they really love me, so that must be true, but I don't feel it. And so, like, wrong with me is I think that's a common empath, and maybe human, but I think especially empath place to go is like, if I'm not agreeing with other people's realities, there must be something wrong with me, which is totally not the case.
I love that. So I want to move on to something else, but
Sure.
Well, it's totally related actually, so we're not totally moving on. But but before I do that, I do just want to say, I just want to make sure that if you have comments or questions, now is the time, and feel free to go ahead and type those in so we can respond to those. And I know sometimes when we're showing up on Facebook, you can think that you're typing into the chat box that we would see, but so just make sure that you're not typing into, say, a Facebook post, but rather actually on where this video is showing up. I hope that makes sense. So just wanted to put that out there because we don't see any questions coming through. And I know there are a lot of people that have been really excited about our show today and talking about this subject. So just want to put that out there in case that helps anybody. But are you familiar with Dr. Judith Orloff and her book?
I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar with it, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, that's okay. I'm just going to show it here because some people might find this a good resource for them. Dr. Judith Orloff, The Empath Survival Guide, Life Strategies for Sensitive People. And I just want to share one of her quotes because I love that you were bringing it back to trust and self-trust. I was just recently doing some workshops on this, so this is why I have this handy. Self-trust matters because the path to your dreams, so we're might venture into some other little areas, but I just want to touch on this. And look at this. Well, this is actually from a different book. It's okay, so let me just be clear. I don't want to misquote someone, but that's a really good book for empaths. This is actually from Marsha Weeder's book, Dream, Clarify and Create What You Want. But she talks about self-trust in there as well. Self-trust matters because the path to your dreams will take you into the unknown. Self-trust comes from connecting to your heart wisdom, not just your intellect. Self-trust comes from knowing who you are and being true to your purpose. That was Marsha Weeder. So I just wanted to add on that because I think when we think about trust, so often we think about trust with other people, but it's about bringing it home first, trusting yourself first. And like you said, not doubting, not moving into a space of doubting and denying what you're experiencing. What you're experiencing is real, and there may be more to learn from it, more information. That's
absolutely. I put a quote in my book from a nonviolent communication trainer that was also another pivotal moment in my life, which he said, your feelings are not up for negotiation. They are just the lived experience of the moment. So they are just what you're experiencing in the moment that you're experiencing them. And so they can't be wrong, because I've heard so many people, and I used to do this myself, like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. I feel to this or to that. It's like, no, that's what you feel. That was just your response to life in that moment. You can look at it and understand what it's all about. And that was a big one for me, is to stop making my feelings wrong and to start to listen to what they had to tell me, and communicate with me. And there's so much valuable information there, and to trust a little bit that I think of it's like your emotional guidance system, and it's telling you something. So if something's upsetting you, like, there's some useful information there that you might want to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And so, yes, let's bring it back to your book, Finding Your Own Happy. And I love the cover, by the way. That's beautiful.
Thank you. This is the ebook. It's going to be published with a publisher coming out next year, so I'll have a slightly different cover. But yeah, this is my first version, and I do love it.
It's gorgeous. So tell us more about your book.
Sure. So, as I said before, so the subtitle is The Soul Searcher's Guide to Peace and Happiness in Everyday Life. And it was written from that perspective of like, wow, I've been searching so long and I've done so much work on myself and I'm still not all that happy. What am I missing? So it's part my story of going from struggling with depression, feeling crazy, sometimes suicidal, not understanding what I was missing and trying all these things and not getting anywhere. And then really getting to the other side of that and all of the pieces and all of the keys that made a difference for me. So one of the big keys that we've been talking about the most, because I think it's the most central, is that I was actually empathic. And so going to therapy and trying to figure out what's going on for you when you're feeling everybody else's feelings, unless you identify it as that, it's not going to be that helpful. So there was that. So that's a huge piece of what shifted my experience. And so I give some tools and guidance about how to work with your empathic abilities, how to trust yourself. That's a big piece for me. I talk a little bit about childhood trauma, how childhood trauma also connects with being empathic, and some of the things that we learned in childhood that might be affecting us. Some of those pieces about learning to trust you and your own experience. Let's see, what else is in there? Working a bit with your energy, which is a lot of what empaths are doing, is how to work with your energy. I talk about the chakra system and how to work with your chakras. Also some exercises to work with your energy in relationship to being empathic. So how to pull your energy back to you, how to unhook yourself from everyone else's energy if they're hooked into you, how to occupy your own space, things like that. And so it's really all of the keys. I put in all of the pieces that, all of the different awarenesses and different pieces that I needed to realize and understand about myself in order to get to the other side of being depressed and struggling with depression in my life. And it's not everything one might need to know if they are struggling with depression, but I touch on all the key pieces that really made a difference. So whether it's learning how to work with your inner child, or understanding your empathic abilities, or balancing your chakras, or a few other things, dealing with your trauma. It was like all of those things coming together. No one of them alone made the difference, but all of them coming together. And they're all the things I use all the time to make a difference in my own life when I'm going through a funk. So.
Nice. Okay. Would you share with us a little bit more, because this is the inspirational interview show about moving forward beyond challenging times. Would you share with us a little bit more about what I'm gathering that there was some trauma in your childhood. Is that something you'd be open to sharing?
Sure. Well, I had a very interesting, different childhood, and it took me a long time to understand that there was trauma there and that it was challenging for me. And this is a big part of me learning to trust my perceptions of reality, because I had this experience of childhood that my mom in particular just didn't understand and couldn't, like, I would bring things up about like that really didn't seem normal to me. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was a great mom, blah, 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 blah. And then I would talk to other people and I would see it reflected outside of my life and say like, no, like based on everybody else's experience, this is really not normal. And so I had to validate for myself the lack of emotional support would be one of the things, and just unavailability that my parents had to myself, because they could never validate for me. And this was a tricky place too, that I think some people struggle with, is that compared to a lot of people, I didn't have obvious trauma. Like, I wasn't sexually abused. I wasn't obviously neglected. I wasn't, didn't grow up in an alcoholic family. I didn't have all these obvious indicators of trauma and abuse. And yet all of these little pieces added up for me, including I lost a caregiver when I was 11 that had I didn't even realize had a huge impact on me. I joke that he was my third parent, and so not having emotional support around that was also hugely impactful. So there's been a lot of years where I felt like I didn't have a right to feel upset about things, and I didn't have a right, like, nothing so horrible happened to me, so why do I feel so screwed up? And it was slowly that I had to acknowledge my own pain around what I didn't get as a child, and the lack of support. And maybe for a different person that's more resilient or had different constitution or makeup, it wouldn't have impacted them the same way, but it was hugely challenging for me and hugely impactful for me. And to validate my own reality was part of that, like, coming out of depression and insanity, to say, actually, no, like, that doesn't, going on love, that didn't feel like love to me. My parents would tell me, we love you, we just don't love you the way that you want us to love you. And there might be some truth to that, but also it didn't make anything wrong with wanting to be loved in the way that worked for me, and the way that felt truly loving and supportive for me. So that's a bit of my experience, and there's some other little pieces maybe there, but
I love that. I love that you brought it back to, I didn't necessarily have this or this or this kind of trauma, but nevertheless, you still had experiences that led you to depression, suicidal feelings at some point.
yeah.
I think it's really key to note that it's okay what I'm trying to say is, I think it can be so easy to judge ourselves for feeling like, oh, I'm not supposed to have this reaction or this experience or be this impacted emotionally because I wasn't sexually abused, or because I wasn't, something that might appear to be, oh yeah, that happened. So yeah, that makes sense why they feel this way. And
Right.
Someone else, you may on the outside may think, what, everything looks fine. When you have something that's more of an internal personal journey that no one else can really understand, it can be easy to judge yourself and think that you don't have a right to feel the way you feel. So I love that you mentioned that.
And it's so interesting because I had, maybe in the last couple of years, had a conversation with my uncle who was present in my early childhood. And I was revealing some of my pain around childhood. And he's like, that was one of the really validating things. He's like, I know, I was there. I get what you're saying. Mm. And my parents could never say that to me. And someone who was actually there and witnessed it was able to reflect that back to me. And so all of these years of feeling crazy and like I just was ungrateful or whatever, here's someone else that said, no, actually, like, you were kind of starved for love and affection, and you have a total right to feel how you feel. And I think there's a lot of people that run around, and even people who have gone through more severe trauma will say, well, so-and-so had it so much worse, or like, this didn't happen to me. And we all downplay our own traumatic experiences because they don't look like somebody else's, rather than owning that, yes, it did impact us. Yes, it did feel the way it felt. And also, there's, in the world of trauma and child psychology, there's a lot of talk now about, like, I guess, like, you could call it microaggressions or micro traumas, and how a whole bunch of little things that taken on their own don't seem like a big deal, when they add up together can create that experience of feeling traumatized in one's life. And so if you have a bunch of little things that are off in your childhood, and they're off for many years, and you're not getting your needs met, that can be just as traumatic as like one super scary, life-threatening event that you were able to get over. And sometimes worse, because like if it's a trauma that's just at one point in time, you can kind of, depending on your age, encapsulate it into that one point in time and move forward and know that that was just that event, versus an ongoing sort of challenging situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what it looks like when a child is starved for affection?
So, like maybe they're not ever held or comforted when they cry would be an example, or just little children, like their mechanism is to cry, right? To get attention, to have their needs met. And so when you have a parent that's not really very attentive to the needs of a young child, that can be quite traumatizing and challenging.
How do you think it shows up in the child's response when they're older? So not a baby anymore crying, but now they're a kid. Like you said, around age 11, what might be a way that a child would be showing on the outside that they're starved for affection?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question.
I know I'm totally throwing this on you. It's okay.
I mean, sometimes it can be caretaking and pleasing behaviors. So trying to take care of the parent because they're looking for the parent to be able to take care of them. And if a parent is unstable, that's, and what I write about in my book is if you're up until a certain age, maybe a little bit before 11, but if your parent is not okay or having emotional drama in their life, you're going to try to take care of them, and you're going to try to behave in ways that make them be okay so that you can be okay, because your very survival is attached to them. So there's a lot of weird patterns that get set in place about how to give and receive love, how to show up and try to take care of your parent so that you don't die, essentially. Because, like, you know, if you don't have a parent to take care of you, it's a life-threatening situation. Right. And that can be just being emotionally unavailable, can even feel life-threatening to that little child. So caretaking, or it could go the opposite way in sort of rebelliousness, and I don't need anybody, and push everybody away, and like, I hate you kind of thing. I remember I had an argument with my mom where things clicked with me, where she said that I had told her, I hate you, go away, and she felt rejected. And so she did, basically. And that just clicked so many things for me, because my background is working with children and child development, and pretty much every kid I've ever spent any length of time with tells their caregiver, I hate you, go away. And really what they're looking for is security and support, and to be there for them. And so when I understood that my mom didn't understand that, it just helped me understand so much more about her parenting and the validity of some of my feelings about what had happened to me in childhood. So
you talked earlier about the turning point when you realized that you were an empath and what energies you were picking up on. Was there a turning point for you when you realized, oh, I've just been looking for more affection, and it's okay for me to feel the way that I feel, even though my family doesn't quite validate that? Was there a turning point in that?
Necessarily affection. I mean, it was attention also was a big thing for me, just like wanting my parents' attention. But there was a time when I was like feeling very depressed and kind of suicidal and very in a lot of conflict with my family of origin, with my parents. And part of that was because I was in this like, either I'm crazy or they're crazy kind of feeling of like, and I was trying to still convince them and get them to validate like my experiences in childhood, how they weren't there for me, and they just weren't, or that like how they were showing up for me didn't really feel good to me. And there was a point when I started to validate for that for myself, and to say, no, like I really have a right to feel how I feel. I have a right to what I feel about what happened to me in childhood, and they might not be able to get it, but I get it, and some other people in my life get it. And so I'm not going to make myself wrong for that anymore. And it was really that the beginning of that internal validation of like, I'm going to show up for what works for me and what feels good to me. I don't care if my parents ever get it. They're probably never. There was a moment I decided I was going to stop having that conversation with my mom and acknowledge she's never going to get it, but I'm going to get it. And it was in this fight with her, and I was like, either I'm crazy or she's crazy, and I am not going to be living in the place where I feel crazy anymore. I'm done feeling crazy, so I'm going to trust my sense of things on this, and I'm going to accept my version of reality. And that was huge for me. Then it was like, okay, we don't have to have that conversation. We can just let it be. I understand also why, and I write about this in the book as well, why she couldn't hear me, and why to hear all of the pain that I had been through in childhood and how hard it had been for me would sort of invalidate her perception of reality and her experience of being a good mom, and like that she thought she was doing a good job and that she was so off the mark. And I can totally understand why she wasn't willing to to own that or see that, because it would be huge to try to process that after the fact, and to process that she had missed so many things. And
I think
so,
go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I think the key word is, because, it like makes me a little sad when I think too of how, because I think that happens actually probably more than we realize, right? And this isn't about shaming parents, but I think to be in that space where they realize, wait, what? My kid experienced this and I thought, everything was okay. I think the key word is listening, and, not falling into a trap of, well, now it's, the blame shame game, but rather, well, now that we both know, now that we are both aware of kind of, what our experience was and what's going on here, we want to resolve it. Then it's taking that next step and having that conversation and listening.
And yes, absolutely. And for me, it was like coming to the point that I realized that because I tried for many years to like try to resolve it with my parents and try to get them to show up for me in ways that they never had. And at some point, my resolution was just to acknowledge me and acknowledge what was true for me. And like even my dad, I loved him, and he passed away this year, and I just had to come to terms with that. In some ways, he could never be the dad that I wanted him to be and I needed him to be, but that he did actually really love me, and he loved me in his own way, and that I was like, at some point I had to stop. So this is how like it shows up in adult life. You keep trying to like resolve this thing or get the attention from your parent that they never gave you, or give the, and at some point I had to just recognize he's just not capable of being that person to me, and that's okay, and he loves me in his own way, and it's also okay for me to still desire that and want that, even though he couldn't give it to me. And then there's some, what we call in nonviolent communication, we call it mourning. So it's just like this acknowledgement and acceptance of what is, and a little bit of grief sometimes around it, and then ability to move on. So it's like when you accept reality as it is, you can just feel what that is for you, and then you have more choice afterwards, instead of trying to fight it all the time and make it something that it's not.
Right.
And that was part of my letting go process of him and his life. He was ill for many years, and so to just, acknowledge like this is what I have with him, and I'm just going to accept what it is, and grieve that it could never be something else, and appreciate what I did get. So
I think it's key to realize sometimes when we may have fallen into having certain expectations of a person, and like you said, maybe they're not able to give in the way that we think they should give or the way that we need to receive, but to recognize, oh, okay, this is them, let go of the expectation and realize that, I don't know, I hope that's resonating for someone out there. So,
yeah, exactly. So, our expectations will often cause us pain if others are not able to meet them, and you can have expectations, just know who can and can't meet them, and move on when something is not working for you.
What are some other ways then, once you decided to make that choice for yourself that, okay, I'm not going crazy, and that's just, where she is, and how did you start to self-soothe and turn the tide more so that you could, so that you could start, I don't know, I guess, what did that next phase look like for you?
Sure.
Then?
Well, so one of the exercises that I did that I think is really great is to say, like in the clarity phase, is to say, if this person were not a family member, how would I feel about that, how they were interacting with me, and how would I feel about how they're treating me? And with my parents, one of the things was like, oh, well, they never call me and they never reach out to me, and I always have to call them if I ever want to talk to them. If they were a friend in my life, like that really annoys me, and I don't stay friends with those kinds of people for very long. I want a reciprocal relationship. And so that was very clarifying for me. And it also took away some of the guilt I had about the kind of relationship I had with my parents. So that's a little exercise, like take away whatever family label you have on that person and then just look at what the relationship is. And so first off was that validation of me, like I have a right to my feelings and it's okay to feel this way, and I'm not just crazy, or I'm not overreacting, or I'm not being ridiculous, or I'm not ungrateful, or whatever. It's like, no, I know what feels good to me, and I know what doesn't, and I'm going to choose that. I also had the lovely opportunity that I, around that time, had a few people in my life that I felt really connected with, and I had that contrast of like, okay, well, this is what it does feel like when somebody really wants to show up for me and is being loving and caring to me. And I know what that feels like, and that feels really good to me. And so, oh, and this is different, and no, that doesn't. And like, it isn't that I just don't know how to receive love, because I'm receiving it over here in a way that feels good to me. So that can't be true anymore. And then there's a lot of other things. I did a lot of work with my own belief systems, also like inner sort of working with my inner child part and comforting that little girl inside of myself and giving her some of the love, care, and affection that I didn't get, which I do write about as well in the book, is to one of the things that I see a lot for people who are sort of having emotional distress is that the inner child will start to try to run your life and try to run the show. So if you're freaking out, the inner child is trying to take over and like make sure everything's okay. And if you can separate out the part of you that's the inner child and bring in the competent adult and take care of that inner child, then everything gets easier. And some of that stress goes away. And I've had so many sessions with people, even like introductory sessions, where all we do is like reconnect them with their inner child, and they mourn and they cry tears, and they get reconnected, and they give themselves that comfort and that support and that acknowledgement that maybe I've talked to women in their like 50s or 60s that had some trauma from like early childhood that they never got to be acknowledged for. And it's such a healing moment to like give that little girl that support and tell her she wasn't wrong, and that like we're sorry that someone wasn't there for her, whatever it is. So that can be hugely soothing.
Very liberating too.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people, I think empaths, but I think other people too, a lot of people struggle with loneliness. And loneliness was like, I had a huge well of loneliness in my heart for a long time. And some of it was that I was truly lonely. And our society, another thing I write about in my book, is the conditions and context in which you live might be impacting how you feel about yourself and your life. And sometimes you are living a very isolated life, and loneliness is a really natural response to that. And yet there's also an inner place of loneliness that I felt very deeply. And so to do some work with that internal part of myself and comforting that really deep well of loneliness inside of myself really helped shift things for me. And now I am still alone a lot of the time, just because of the circumstances of my life, the nature of my life. And that deep well of loneliness just doesn't, and not that lonely. Every once in a while, like, gosh, I wish I had someone else to talk to or hang out with, but that deep heartache loneliness is not the same anymore.
Becoming your own friend and caring for yourself makes a difference.
Yeah. Oh, such a huge difference. And recognizing it's not the sum total of you, and that there is a piece of you that can give the care and comfort to that lonely part. And of course, it's not everything. Of course, we want other human contact and not going to resolve everything. I don't think my point of view is that we're not meant to live in a vacuum. We are social creatures that thrive on social connection, but they kind of play on each other.
I think it's common in life that at some stage of a person's life, there may be a period where they're more on their own, more alone. And it can be a fantastic time to really get to learn about yourself and, create more inner strength. And because what we do for ourselves, creating that inner strength and understanding our emotions and, getting our head right and our thoughts right and all that stuff, I mean, that then trickles out to everyone else. And
that's such an interesting, tying back to where we started with the empath conversation, is that being able to really be with yourself and your own energy and get clear about what is you truly and what it feels like to be in your own space and not feeling everybody else. That was huge for me to understand, this is me and my true nature. And I know that when I'm not connected to this space, I'm probably not connected to myself fully. And I'm mixed up with everybody else. So if you're an empathic person that's just been managing everybody else's emotional experiences your whole life, that's going to be really important for you to be like, I think of that, there's a movie with Julia Roberts, and I think it's maybe The Runaway Bride, where she just likes the kind of eggs of whoever she's with. And at the end, she's like trying out all these kinds of eggs to find out what kind of eggs she likes because she never knew. And like, what if that's actually sort of true as an empath too? Like, you don't even know what you feel. You don't even know who you are because you're just so mixed up with everybody else and all of their points of view.
I want to say something that is kind of a lot, but I just want to add it in there because I just recently learned this and I think it's really key. So anybody out there who's watching that knows they're an empath, the whole piece about being in your body is so key, because if you are picking up on everyone else's energy, you can feel unsafe. You can feel like you're not protected, and there are ways to protect yourself. And one of the ways that will really help you is first for you to know that you are in your body. So I realize that sounds really big right now. But going back to the whole energy thing and chakras and all of that stuff, there are ways to make sure that you are feeling that. And
or what I say is, and I'm going to talk about this more in my class tomorrow, but is like occupying your own space and occupying your own life. Because I had this energetic impression where like an empath, and I talked to somebody recently about this, it's like you kind of go away from your own space. Imagine you are a basket. You kind of just like take yourself out of the basket and let everybody else fill up your basket. And so then you're just feeling everything that everyone else is feeling all the time. If you put yourself back in the basket and really occupy that basket and like be in your life fully, you are not going to be so swarmed and so swamped by everyone else and everyone else's feelings. And it's going to make a huge, huge difference. And I see that so much. And the more that you show for yourself and your own life, the less overwhelming everybody else's stuff is going to be, because you're increasing your own.
Yes. Yeah. There's so much more that we could say about that, but I think it goes back to realizing that that's a conscious decision to make that choice of saying, I'm going to occupy more of my own space, and allowing things to shift from there. So go ahead.
Well, and I think there's, just having followed a lot of empath threads, I think there's a lot of, it can be convenient to use being an empath as an excuse not to be committed to your own life and not invest in your own life. And a way to avoid, like, it's really convenient just to be mixed up in everybody else's stuff, because then you don't have to choose for you, you don't have to figure out your own life. And so there's ways I think that people sort of lean on that and it benefits them. And
I love that you just brought that up. Yes, exactly. Yes. And Betty just commented. Thank you, Betty. She says, it is important to resolve inner child conflicts first before coaching. My concern is countertransference. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Elana?
I think,
go ahead.
yeah, sure. I think we're always resolving things, and I don't think it's a done job necessarily, but I think it is important to do enough of your own work so that you can be really aware of what is yours and what is not. And when you are, and the work that I do is, because I'm not giving people advice so much, I'm guiding them in their own process, and they are their own authority on what's true for them and what's going on for them. That countertransference thing is a little less likely to come up, because it's really the process that I use is really an empowerment process and working with that person's knowing and their body and their truth. And so I'm letting them determine what's real and true for them rather than giving my own. I'll ask questions and invite them to possibilities. So for me, it's a little less crucial that all of that is worked out.
Okay, awesome. So we are at the end of our show. Are there any last words you would like to share with our audience today, whether it be about empaths or about your book that's coming out, about the work that you're doing these days?
Yeah, sure. So I would love if you've enjoyed the conversation and think that what we're talking about is of value and then you'd like to read my book, I'd be happy to gift you a free copy of Finding Your Unhappy. It's not yet published in a physical book form, but you can get a free PDF version at yourhappyguide.com, and you can read more in depth about everything that we're talking about.
Awesome. That is such a nice gift.
Yes. I wrote it to help people who struggle with similar things as I have. And so I just really want it to be out in the world doing its job, basically.
And is there a publishing date coming up that you can share with us?
Well, so I will have physical copies come June. It will be available in the bookstores January 1st of next year. So,
okay. Nice.
So you can start looking for it in bookstores around December, but official publication date is January 1st, 2019 is what we're in. Oh my gosh.
I know, it's bizarre. And where can people find out more information about you if they'd like to connect with you for coaching or anything else that you do?
Great place to find me is on my Facebook page, actually. I post a lot of things there. I'm doing fairly regular videos. I'm doing things like this. I post different classes. I have a free class coming up tomorrow night. That's posted there if you want to check it out. And that's just really the best way to be in touch with me. And if you go on my if you get my book, you'll also be connected to me that way, and you'll be hearing from me that way as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Elana. For all those watching, thank you for being here with us live, as well as all those that will watch the replay. My next show is this coming Wednesday, April 4th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over on BBS Radio. And I'm going to be speaking with Carrie Hummingbird and her Skills Not Pills movement, which I'm so excited about, and may also actually be an extension of today's conversation with Elana, where we bring up empaths and sensitivities and that sort of stuff as well. So if you like this, then bbsradio.com Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But thank you to everyone. We've got Paula Davidson saying, thanks, ladies. I have a friend, would love for her to read your book. Awesome. So fantastic. What's the website one more time, Elana?
yourhappyguide.com. And I will post it when I get off. I'll post it in the comments as well.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Lovely to chat with you.
It was lovely chatting with you too. And for all those watching, just remember that every day is always a new day. Wherever you are today does not have to be where you are tomorrow. And that can start simply by making the choice. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye for now.